Hi, this is Dead Author, Not Live. I'm trying something different for the release of Embrace the Romance and Pets in Space 2. Since I live in kind of a small place and can't show up in a bookstore really to do a reading, I thought I would try to do a video and do a little short reading from my story in Embrace the Romance called Time Trap. And as you know, I usually wear these glasses, but I can't read with them on, so I'm taking them off and I'm putting on the dreaded reading glasses. You might notice that only one side has magnification. That's because I have monovision. So we'll see how I do. Do I look quite scholarly and serious? All right, we'll see how this goes. First, I want to tell you a little bit about my story. Hiding in time is not as easy as you would think. USAF engineer Master Sergeant Briggs, only his mother ever called him by his first name, is not enjoying his birthday, and I know how he feels. A year older and ordered to recuperate in a quiet bay away from the Gradian outpost, he is ready to mutiny and go back to his beloved engines. When his friends send him a gift from Area 51, he figures it will relieve his boredom for an hour or so until he turns it on and gets his second present of the day. Madison and her parrot partner, Sir Rupert, are on the track of a traitor to the rebellion when they time travel into a trap. Their only way out is via an old transport pad, but instead of sending them somewhere, it sends them back in time, straight into the arms of the one man who could kick her tires and light her fires. She would like to get to know the handsome engineer, but the trouble following her can get people erased from existence. The fact he's a hero like her long-lost brother just makes her want to protect him more. Briggs does not trust time travelers with good reason, but now he has to work with the unlikely pair because trouble is coming. Trouble that puts an outpost filled with geeks and ancient technology at risk. It's not the first time he's worked with a woman to save the universe, but it's the first time he's wanted to keep her for himself. If only she were a little older. With a time service interdiction force on their heels, can the three craft a plan that will save a base full of geniuses and technology and get them the happy ending they deserve? Chapter 1, we'll start right there. There's Sir Rupert. Master Sergeant Briggs, yes, he had a first name, but only his mother had ever used it, stared somewhat balefully at the crate delivered him by the lowliest airman currently stationed on the so secret they weren't even supposed to think about it Gradian outpost. No one had wanted to be the one to bring it to him. Rumor was there was a no-fly zone over his recuperation sector. What a bunch of wimps. So he was kind of grouchy about being sidelined for his health and turning a year older. Who wouldn't be? Geez, he'd been banished to a freaking hut. So he'd gotten shot. It wasn't a graze. It was just a graze that maybe got an alien infection, but he'd kicked that to the curb. And what do? They park him on a bay overlooking a freaking ocean. It was hot, but it wasn't the heat bugging him. It was all this freaking fresh air. Like he was some kind of beach bum or suffering a midlife crisis instead of a guy who lived and died for planes and spaceships and the motors that made them move. His lungs needed engine fumes, not tropical breezes. He needed to work, not a birthday present. He glared at the crate. It didn't flee. It just sat there. Only two people he knew would be brassy enough to send him a birthday present, especially right now. Sarah Donovan and Doc Clementine. He could hear them laughing all the way from the Milky Way. They wouldn't be laughing when they turned 45. 5 years to 50. How the hotel did that happen? He wasn't supposed to get older if he took a trip to a galaxy far, far away. He was pretty sure someone had promised him he'd get younger if he signed on the dotted line. Or if not younger, then he wouldn't get older. Some kind of paradox or something. About to stomp away from the crate, he hesitated. Donovan and the doc did know him pretty well. Were they busting his chops or sending him a lifeline? If they didn't want to drop and give him 20 when he got back to Earth, there'd better be something interesting in there. He pulled out his army knife, one on steroids, and selected a chunky blade. He applied this with force to the nails holding the lid down, yanked the lid back, and tossed it aside. There was a note on top of the straw. At least they'd been smart enough not to send him an actual birthday card. We found this in the Area 51 garage sale and immediately thought of you. Cha-cha-cha, Donovan and Doc, and their significant others. P.S. According to the files, this was collected on 278-9645. Ring any bells? Area 51 garage sale, he chuckled. He should have known. Those two did know the way to make his engineer's heart happy. He dug through the straw, tossing it aside. The late afternoon wind would clear it away. The wind was like the tide. It came, it went, every freaking day. Weren't even any birds chirping on this blasted place. What kind of island didn't have birds? His hand struck metal. He felt around for the edges and lifted it clear. Heavy little sucker. It pulled at his wound, but he ignored that and carried it over to the rough table he'd built on his second day of exile, using some of the driftwood washed in by the foxtrot tide. The base doc could tell him to take it easy, but she couldn't make him do it. If he'd had the parts, he'd have given the table an engine and driven it back to the base. He set the big disc down on top of the table and stepped back to study it. Not exactly promising. It looked like a manhole cover. Maybe those two were jerking his chain. Only his knowledge of Donovan and the doc kept him from heaving it into the surf. And the fact that Area 51 did not save manhole covers, not even for garage sales. 2789645. Actually, that did ring a few bells. He pulled up the stool he had also made and considered the item, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. If memory served, which it might not now that he was so foxtrot old, that was the first planet they had dropped a team on back in the early days of Project Enterprise, when they weren't sure any of it was going to work. The planet had had a barely habitable atmosphere, some algae that only excited the botanists, and this. The geeks had studied it for a while but had lost interest when it didn't do anything. No one had asked him to look at it then, and he'd had other priorities, so he didn't care. Now, he might care a little. He'd gotten that desperate. Why had they sent him this thing? Something about it must have interested them. He leaned back, wondering how they got their hands on it, and then how they got it to him for his birthday, all without getting him or themselves flagged and hauled in to explain. Until he remembered who they were. Alone, those two were dangerous. Together, lethal. He liked that about them, and they could dance. He'd always hoped to find a permanent dance partner, but he didn't hang out in the right places for that kind of woman. He sighed, reached out a finger, and flicked the edge of the metal. He wasn't worried about touching it. If there'd been any danger in touching it, someone would already be dead or turned into an alien. It was thicker than a manhole cover. No sign of a seam on the sides. He ran his hands across the top. It was rough, mostly from mild corrosion, he decided. His fingers found indentations that could be an alien version of screws or bolts. He lifted it up and steadied the rim, rolling it left, then right. Lines were cut in the rim, not unlike a coin, but then his fingers found two depressions side by side. He pushed them both. They gave, but nothing happened. Not a surprise. The geeks had probably done that much. He pulled out his cheaters, one of the gifts that kept on giving, for crossing over into the over 40 range, and steadied the rim. Was there a seam? He turned it over. The bottom was dotted with multiple ovals that formed a circular grid across the surface. He touched one of the holes. It indented about an inch. He felt around. Was that wiring he felt in there? What do you do? He muttered. The wind and the tide didn't know. Time to see if he could open this bad boy up. Be nice to put one over on the geeks of Area 51. I'd like to thank you for joining me for this little excerpt, and I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun writing this story, and I'm loving the fact that Embrace the Romance, Pets in Space 2 is in the release process, and that we're raising money for hero dogs. So if you already have your copy, please tell someone. And thank you for coming along for our ride. Bye.